10 Reasons Why the Coronavirus Pandemic Should Terrify You. In the past 200 years or so, we've all worked together and managed to come up with even more innovative ways to end life on Earth as we know it. The invention of gunpowder itself was an unprecedented innovation in mass slaughter. The death counts of some wars took away entire chunks of our population, though the inventions of the coming centuries would make that look tame in comparison. One danger, however, has stayed unaltered for whatever length of time that we can recall. We, despite everything, don't pay attention to it as well. The crown infection story is breaking as we compose this, with cases detailed in nations around the globe. It has totally separated administrations in China and close-by nations, getting one of the most innovatively created nations and the remainder of the world off guard. The explanation this ongoing breakout has stunned everybody is that we've overlooked that the greatest danger to human life isn't nukes or whatever else, however pandemics. Indeed, even with all our cutting-edge innovation, some of which may even neutralize us during episodes, the risk of an infection appearing suddenly and finishing human development as we probably am aware it is still as genuine as it generally seemed to be. Here are the 10 reasons why coronavirus should terrify you. Number 1. Globalization is making things worse, not better. One would believe that as a result of the world being as associated as it is today, irresistible ailments stand significantly less of a possibility than some other time ever. It's consistent with a degree, as well, as our connectedness progresses our aggregate information in different fields, particularly medication. On the off chance that you can get data on a malady in a disengaged piece of the world, scientists from around the globe can examine it and develop guards against it. The issue is, however, that when a really genuine flare-up, like COVID-19 happens, those advantages of worldwide systems neutralize us. A large portion of the occasions, we just don't have any approach to recognize the infections, as they're quite often obscure strains nobody has seen previously. More on that in a piece. So now, with immense, interconnected systems to ship individuals around the globe yet no real way to tell in the event that they're tainted, flare-ups can arrive at a lot further and create guards before we can even identify them. The avian influenza flare-up, for instance, was a more grounded, beforehand obscure strain of an infection discovered uniquely in winged creatures, and is likely an antiquated illness that wasn't a risk until it was. 2. Pandemics have killed far more people than anything else. The reason we don't consider pandemics a serious enough threat is due to our belief that we are now more immune to them, or that they don't kill as many people as other things, like nukes. While it's true that recent advancements in detection and treatment of pathogens has made us better at fighting them, there are also many more of them now, including strains that have never infected humans before. For the death count, deaths from pandemics outnumber any other disaster event in history by a long shot. You don't even need to go into the past, we're currently in the middle of quite a few serious pandemics. The AIDS virus has killed around 40 million people by now. The influenza flu causes around 80,000 to 100,000 annual deaths in the US alone, which is only a fraction of its global death count of 650,000. Even in history, global pandemics are by far the biggest agents of mass destruction we have ever seen. Just take the Justinian plague, which killed around 100 million people over a span of many centuries. At its peak when it first broke out, it's said that around 10,000 people were dying to it every day just in Constantinople. The Spanish flu killed over 100 million in a matter of months, which started during the 4-year-long World War I, the war with the second highest death count ever of 40 million. The reasons these viruses failed to kill everyone are many. The Spanish flu, for example, just decided to get milder as time went by, looking us in the eye and saying that it chooses to spare us. The world wasn't as interconnected as today during these plagues, either. If a strengthened strain of any of those plagues returns, you can be sure that it would have a much bigger impact today. 3. Every new outbreak requires working from scratch. At the hour of composing this, various nations including the US have forced required isolate methodology at their significant air terminals. Nations around the globe have likewise forced crisis well-being cautions to keep COVID-19 out, however cases are jumping up constantly. China is by all accounts in lockdown mode, as more than 200 individuals have kicked the bucket and 10,000 contaminated by the coronavirus. It makes one wonder, for what reason do we get ourselves so caught off guard for infection episodes each couple of years? It's basic, our clinical innovation is as yet not propelled enough to identify and discover remedies for new flare-ups. Past clinical information doesn't have any significant bearing to new strains, which require new evaluation and conclusion. That burns through valuable time, as well. In the vast majority of the most exceedingly terrible pandemics ever, the greater part of the deaths happened in the underlying days, before individuals could discover approaches to contain it. Without a doubt, that was as straightforward as perhaps not dozing close to where you crap in the medieval times, Yet even present-day plagues like the Spanish flu were the deadliest in their underlying days. Each new episode, despite everything, requires understanding the pathogen without any preparation, which thus influences our capacity to successfully react to the emergency. 4. They are getting more powerful, and at a scary rate. If you read about some of the more serious outbreaks in recent times, including coronavirus, the more concerning details seem to be the gory ones. Take Ebola. Most people were horrified by the hazmat suits and stories of medical professionals horribly dying due to infection while treating the locals. It's a heartbreaking image, though hardly the scary part. Outside the purview of primetime news cameras, many other diseases kill in much more horrifying ways. The most noticeably awful part, however, isn't that it's a strain we had no safeguards against. It's that each time we study another episode of Ebola as it's as yet continuous, it ends up being a more grounded variant of a formerly discovered strain. That implies that the infections are quickly showing signs of improvement at not biting the dust, just as advancing quicker than anybody expected, or even knew about. Indeed, even the present flare-up of coronavirus is because of a strain that can't characteristically influence people, however has transformed to have the option to do as such. It's likewise more grounded and more harmful than any strain found previously, which is the reason it's such a major emergency in China. These flare-ups demonstrate what scientists have been stating for quite a long time. More current and all the more remarkable strains of infections advancing against our prescriptions is perhaps the greatest risk to human life. 5. Many new, previously unknown viruses are showing up. As far as climate change affecting pathogens is concerned, the relationship is debatable. Of course, there's no doubt that warmer temperatures would make them spread to many more countries than before, though that could be fixed easily if the governments work together. A more pressing relationship between climate change and a virus-related extinction event lies somewhere on the top of the world map. The permafrost set all over the Arctic, particularly in Siberia, is believed to house a number of dormant and dangerous diseases. Many scientists are of the opinion that quite a few of our recent strains of viruses like the Ebola came from the permafrost that has already melted, and it doesn't sound too far-fetched to us. Regardless, many new strains of viruses, including the coronavirus, have been discovered in recent years, a phenomenon not many have been able to properly explain. If experts are to be believed, the melting permafrost would also give way to diseases that we may have never even seen, let alone dealt with. 6. Microbes are mysterious and impossible to study. In the event that we got some information about the most prevailing kind of life on Earth after people, you'd likely state vertebrates or something. In the event that you take a gander at the numbers or ask a researcher, however, you'd understand that no other animal thinks about microorganisms in numbers, decent variety, sorts of natural surroundings they live in and so forth. You'd discover organisms living wherever you can envision, from the most ungracious profundities of the sea to space. While there's no uncertainty that they've accomplished for themselves, their assorted variety makes them hard to read and counter for us. We basically have no clue what number of sorts of organisms exist on Earth. Disregard Earth. They as of late found a sort of microbes in the human gut that the researchers had never observed. It was strange to such an extent that they needed to make an entire separate part of life for it, which more likely than not isolated from our own in the early long stretches of advancement. It's just one of the instances of numerous ways we don't and never will completely comprehend the nearly outsider universe of microorganisms, which is essential to battling genuine, human progress compromising pandemics. 7. Vaccines cause some viruses to become even deadlier. Antibodies have a considerable amount of pundits, yet we would all be able to concur that they've figured out how to kill a portion of the most exceedingly awful sicknesses humankind has been tormented with for a great many years. Due to antibodies, individuals aren't passing on the avenues since they incidentally had a rotten one somewhere in the range of 2 centuries ago. Scientifically, however, immunizations accompany a reaction. As indicated by an investigation, immunizations are making infections, particularly the lethal ones, significantly deadlier. It bodes well organically, as antibodies utilized on poultry creatures and different pets may make a few sicknesses more grounded, which could then figure out how to influence people and unleash havoc. Many researchers have scrutinized the investigation in light of the fact that it just influences chickens, as it loans trustworthiness to the counter-immunization development. Despite who it influences and how individuals feel about antibodies, except if we concoct an elective method to construct immunizations, a potential crazy pandemic that slaughters every one of us may simply be one of its symptoms we'd need to manage. 8. Some viruses out there are much worse than COVID-19. The Spanish flu and Black Death are recollected because of their passing check and consequences for the world. That is the reason they sound so unnerving, as they slaughtered a great many individuals and achieved significant changes in society. If we contrast their belongings with a portion of the other more frightening cases of flare-ups, however, with a lower tally, however, They don't stand an opportunity. There have been numerous flare-ups in history far more awful than anything seen during the Spanish influenza, like the 15th century spell of the English sweating sickness, which slaughtered their casualties significantly more horrendously. The main explanation we don't find out about them is that they died down all alone and kept their murder tally low. If they somehow managed to come back to remain, we'd have a much harder time managing them than even the most exceedingly awful episodes in our history. More critically, a portion of these maladies have a place with secretive groups of infections we don't have the foggiest idea how to manage. Indeed, even the Spanish flu was a transformed type of flu recently known to us. As per numerous scientists, the genuine risk to human life is from pathogens that might be totally not the same as anything we've seen previously. 9. The next pandemic is around the corner, and we're not ready. On the off chance that there's one thing that the coronavirus flare-up demonstrates, it's that we're still exceptionally reliant on nature's kindness to keep us alive. Our frameworks are as yet unequipped to manage an infection flare-up, regardless of whether science keeps up that we're in an intense and pressing danger of a worldwide pandemic. One study found that if a worldwide flare-up happens at the present time, it would kill in excess of 80 million individuals due to elevated well-being emergency circumstances in numerous nations around the globe. Scholars are additionally finding numerous new strains of infection, strains they've never observed in creatures at an alarmingly higher rate than previously, especially among domesticated animals. Different examinations have expressed that the following infection is going to come soon if it's not here as of now with COVID-19, and we're absurdly underprepared for it. Finally, 10. We're responsible for making them stronger, too. In all the devastating pandemics in history, there wasn't much we could do. Even today, the viruses are getting stronger as a side effect of antibiotics and other measures that are required to live a comfortable life on Earth. There's nothing much we can do about it except strengthen our medical infrastructure and hope for the best, as it doesn't seem to be our fault. If we look at some historical decisions by major governments and scientific institutions, though, at least some of it is definitely our fault. There are quite a few conspiracy theories around some recent outbreaks originally coming from military labs, and we're seeing no reason why some of them can't be true. Biological and chemical research has always been a huge part of military budgets, and looking at the possibility of them causing pandemics in the civilian world, it may not be the best idea. Worryingly enough, the US government recently removed checks from the kind of pathogens they can make in the lab, effectively giving private and government labs across the country a license to make newer, deadlier strains of viruses. Of course, the research is also aimed at helping combat these diseases, though the possibility of them being misused for monetary or other reasons is too glaring to ignore. There have been rare cases of genuine human errors leading to leaked viruses, too, like the last outbreak of the H1N1 virus. When the scientists discovered that it was a strain that hadn't been seen since the 1950s and decided to look into the matter, they found that it was because of the lab workers' poor handling of the sample. In this global pandemic, please stay safe by following the guidelines streamed by your respective authorities and health officials. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you like this video. Subscribe and hit the bell button, so you won't miss out when we upload a new video.